thank you for allowing your children to participate in Peace Week. This week has been very eventful, very insightful, and very enlightening for a lot of our kids. We did have a moment of learning about clarity and empathy while we were in the program, and the kids got to be able to talk it out and talk about how it made them feel. And that's basically what this week has been about, is understanding how it makes another person feel when they're excluded or discriminated against. And we all have a different story, but the one thing that I loved about this week was the kids learning that we also have a lot of similarities. The puzzle pieces behind me, the kids got to design their own puzzle pieces of what their lives consist of. And like, there are several of us have the same tradition that we have Friday pizza night at our houses. And so the kids are like, Miss Deja, we have Friday pizza night too. So when they're learning about traditions and different religions and learning about being able to be all inclusive and we can all live in this world together. We have two family that is Korean, we have a Muslim family in our program, and then we had also a Jewish family in our program, and they got to share their different beliefs and their different traditions that they experience in the course of that. So it was very insightful for all of us.
Yeah, I think a lot of our issues could be solved by getting to know each other better. And
exactly.
It sounds like that's what happened this week.
Very much so.
Why do you think it's important to have something like Peace Camp? I mean, you've said some of it already, but
I think it's extremely important because children, they're not born with biases. That's kind of indoctrinated by the environment in which they live in or the communities in which they live in. So a lot of times when kids come to me, they don't see color, but they experience it as they go out throughout their childhood. They start experiencing different aspects of what racism could look like or what inclusion could look like. Some kids have always been like, oh, I always include all my friends, but they were taught that at a very young age. So being able to catch the kids at this age where they understand the word of empathy and how does this make me feel, then that socially emotional component of them learning to treat people like they want to be treated, and then also giving them a voice to be able to say that doesn't feel good, and being able to give them the ability to say, hey, look, we can do something different. And then a great part of this week was teaching them different tools that they could do to make change, as far as posters on the wall of, hey, our voices matter, or the sit-in, being able to sit in and say, you know what, we're going to be peaceful about it. We talked about being nonviolent and being peaceful, and some of our kids haven't been taught impulse control. So that was a huge component of being able to talk about that this morning of, what would you do if somebody was pouring coffee or ketchup on you because you wanted to eat in the same restaurant as them, and how would you control, your anger and not act out in violence. And so, those were great conversation pieces for the kids, to the point where they were even discussing it amongst themselves when they go out to the gym and having conversations, or they'll come back and ask me questions. Miss Tanisha, what would you do? When will you get to the point where you would be really mad to hit someone? I was like, in that case, I don't know that I would. We talked about, people name calling and how that affects the children and how that affects your psyche. And I told them the same thing my grandfather told me: you only answer to what you are. So if you know you're not that, then ignore them and keep walking. And so, we talked about that a lot, and about how do you combat some of those things that don't feel so good.
You don't like eggs. It doesn't taste like eggs. It just makes it dry. It helps it stick with. Very carefully bring that down. Okay, what's this? What do you think this is? Ooh, what's that?
Oh, sugar.
Sugar. It's sugar. And what is sugar do?
No, it's not fully stirred yet, just me.
I want to stir. I'm not a stir. You know how to stir, right? No, that's fast. And then my mom said, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to work. Yeah. This is really in a professional way.
one thing about it with community, we talk about not only that their community is where they live, but where they go to school, and then even working in the group. This is our community. So the rules for our community is to respect each other. So that's one thing that we really talked about, and how does respect looks like. So culture, social justice. What was really interesting is that with inclusive and exclusive, what I did with the little ones to explain, we actually played a game. So the inclusive, we played a backwards musical chairs. And how that works is that we lined up the chairs. So if there's 16 kids, we put out 15. The goal was to actually find a way to include the one that wasn't going to have a chair. So how that looked was they could either sit them on the lap or push all the chairs together. The kids had to come up with some idea to include that person in there. With the exclusive, how we did it was a game we were in circle and someone stood out. And it was their way. When we held hands, they could not let that person get into the circle. So we basically kept them out. So that was a visual way of showing them what these two words meant. Dominant group. And one thing about it with my little ones, these words can be very challenging. So what I did was I made a coloring sheet. And the coloring sheet gave them an opportunity to discuss what they saw. Then I read the vocabulary word or the meaning and gave them some type of example so they can relate to it. A lot of the relation was I used school and what they see and what they hear in school. So example with this here, this was Senegal. The first week what we did, we talked about Senegal, and it was about a child from Africa that was coming to the United States, and they were mispronouncing his name. So the challenge was, how would you have someone that did not know how to pronounce your name, what would you do? Well, in the story, being that the young man liked soccer, he made a sun and he made a goal with a soccer ball so you can pronounce his name correctly. My favorite one was, where do we see it here? It was Lincoln. Here he is. Lincoln, what he did was, we made a gentleman leaning against the tree, with a can. His name is Lincoln.
She helps my mom cook a lot. I don't do that. I don't help cook that much. I mean, I help cook a lunch. That last lunch. Bro, I barely have it.
Yes, you do, Ben.
No, like of that.
Of what?
The batter? Yes. I don't know how to play this game. Okay, now it's your turn. You guys play one more?